First 10 years and 8 seasons, the one. I'm Squirtle, so if you're playing Pokemon Go, just point your camera at me and take a picture. Tell all your friends you caught me. I'm Seto Kaiba from Yu-Gi-Oh! I directed Yu-Gi-Oh! I directed some Pokemon. I directed Viva Pinata, Ultimate Muscle. I'm Meta Knight from Kirby. I worked on G.I. Joe Sigma 6. I worked on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was Jen, Master Yoshi, leader of the Purple Dragons. I've been a voice actor for over 25 years. I've directed for over 25 years. And the other thing that I do, I'm a singer-songwriter. I've toured with Ringo Starr, Peter Frampton, Leonard Skinner, played with Chicago, Jethro Tull, Hall & Oates, all sorts of rock bands like that, play all original rock and roll. And tonight I'll be playing a concert in special events at 8 o'clock. Solo acoustic show, so there you go. So this is the panel that's my Q&A. I do a panel on Voice Acting 101, which I did, I think it was yesterday. Seems like one big blur of a con, right? And then tomorrow I do one on directing and adaptation and how we make the shows. So this one is just your general Q&A. You guys ask me questions and I hopefully give you an answer that will make some sense. Does that make sense? That's good, that's good. So does someone want to start with a question? Yes?
How does it feel working on the Slayer series?
Slayer, see, I even left that off. So I'm Gowry from Slayers. And if you guys are old school anime fans, that's a great series to check out. That was the first show that I booked a recurring character. I had played a couple of like one-off things in some, I think the first anime dub I ever did was a movie called Gal Force, where I was 2 different robots, and I think I had like 5 lines. But then I auditioned for Slayers and was booked for to play Gowry, which was great. The fun thing about that show was the director and the engineer were good buddies. Like, we became really good friends. We did a lot of sort of late night recording of that show. When you're working on a show that goes straight to DVD, unlike Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, which had to be on network television, where there's a tougher production schedule, when you're working on sort of an anime dub, where there's like, if we get it done next month, that'll be great, but if we don't, whatever. They also never had the scripts 100% written on time, so there's a lot of ad-libbing done on that show. So there'd be times we'd look at Lip Flap and say, oh, there's no line here on your script, but Gowry's obviously saying something in that scene, let's make something up. So there was a lot of that. That was fun to do. You know, growing up watching cartoons, especially American-made cartoons, you didn't really think dubbing, matching lip flap was something that people had to be skilled at doing. But my favorite cartoon growing up was not an American cartoon. My favorite cartoon was a show called Battle of the Planets. And if you don't know Battle of the Planets, you need to look up that anime. In Japan, it's called Gatchaman. G-Force was the name of the group of heroes in Battle of the Planets. I think there were 5 teenagers. There's Mark, Jason, Tiny, Kiap, and Princess. And when they transmute from their normal teenage lives into G-Force, they all turn into these amazing looking like bird character. The fact that nobody is cosplaying as characters from G-Force, I've only seen it once. You guys would be like, why am I not making a cosplay out of this? But the main actor on that show, at least on the American dub, was a voice actor that you might know named Casey Kasem.
Yeah.
That's right, a legend, a legend. So when I was in 5th grade, that was on every day after school. I'd watch G-Force all the time, Battle of the Planets. Make sure that if you do go look for the American dub, you find the one that's Battle of the Planets, not called G-Force. They then later redubbed it with other actors. It's not as good. Battle of the Planets is Casey Kasem. Well, in 5th grade, I could basically impersonate Casey Kasem. I had the same voice I have now in 5th grade. And so we'd play G-Force after school, right? And I was Mark, the leader of G-Force. And so when it came time to be Gowry, basically, Gowry and Brock are my version of Casey Kasem, just in an upper register. You know, because obviously we all know from Scooby-Doo you got Shaggy, which is Casey, right? You know, but golly, Scoobs, that he's like stoned out of his mind. I thought that Gowry could be like Keanu Reeves meets Casey Kasem, you know, we've got a bomb on this bus. We've got to keep this bus moving. Right? Because Gowery's got that kind of vibe. And then Brock was the same thing. Brock was basically Casey Kasem, just higher and like Shaggy, but not as stoned. Well, maybe he was, because he's constantly eating, right? So is Gowery. So wait a second, I get it now. When you do that voice, you have the munchies. So yeah, but Slayers was a lot of fun, and it was a lot of fun to work with that cast. That's where I met some of the people that I've known and worked with for over 20 years. Lisa Ortiz was on that show, Veronica Taylor, Dan Green, all those guys are friends of mine. So yeah, it's pretty good. Good question. All right, somebody else have a question for me? Yeah.
Well, going along that line, especially with Pokemon, so the difference between Rob, how did you get James?
So when I first auditioned for Pokemon, I got no roles. Nobody wanted to book me. I know, it was very, very sad. It was very, very, very sad. They started working with someone to play Brock, and after recording the first day, they decided they didn't like him anymore, and then they called me and said, yeah, you were our second choice, will you come and play Brock? And I was like, wow, am I supposed to feel good about that? Like, it's like, yeah, you know, that other girl wouldn't marry me, but you're kind of okay, and they're like, oh, okay, but I was like, work is work, so I went in, and I was Brock. With James, a good friend of mine had played James in the first 5 episodes. Very, very talented guy, Ted Lewis. Very, very funny. But Ted is a stage actor. His dream is to be on stage and perform. And he was offered an opportunity to do that. And so he left and went on the road to perform. And so they first brought me in to imitate him, because they were like, I think Eric can imitate this. So in the very beginning, I think it's like episode 6 or 7, you'll hear me doing a very sort of darker, straighter version of James as if he's truly a villain. And this was the conversation that took place between me and the director at that time. Now you gotta remember, when these shows are purchased, when we buy them to redo them, the production companies don't always get all of them at once. Sometimes it's like 4 or 5 episodes at a time. And you don't know what's gonna happen later on. Like the fans, you don't know what's gonna happen. So you kind of have to guess dynamics of characters. So this was the conversation. I'm like, I know you want me to imitate what he did, and vocally I'm doing that, but I think these characters are supposed to be funny. And the director's like, no, they want to play it very straight. These guys are like the bad guys of the show, like they're the villains, and that's what's funny, is that they're very straight about it. And I said, I'm not seeing that. I think this character, I think Team Rocket's supposed to be the comic relief. And I think the next episode, I was dressed like a woman. And so where we started is one thing, but then all of the, ooh, yes, all of the silliness and the giggling, all the falsetto stuff, that was me. Because in the beginning, there was no way that they were like, no, that's not what we're doing. And so all that stuff, and also someone asked me earlier today in an interview, you know, about Team Rocket and doing James. And James, to me, I went to a very, very progressive private school in New York, where all of the teachers, you called them by their first names. We all wore we looked like burnt out hippies ourselves. We had no grades. No grades. I never had a grade of going to school. It was all written reports. If you were good in math and you were in 5th grade, you might be put in a class with the 10th graders. So the whole school felt like one big family. And it also helped me in terms of judging people. If you said to me, I'm a B student, that doesn't mean anything to me, because what I want to know is, do you write, do you paint, do you draw? You know, I will judge you on your creativity, on your thinking. To me, tests don't mean anything, because sometimes we take tests well and sometimes we don't. So when I went to school in this very cool, progressive, open-minded, free-thinking place, we played sports against the prep schools of New York, because I went to school in New York. So the other schools we played were all the guys in the blue blazers and the khaki pants who had girlfriends named Muffy and Buffy. And so when I had to do this character, I thought, oh, well, this is totally like the third Crane brother. There's Niles, Frasier, and James. So all I'm doing is being those guys that I played sports against in high school. They weren't quite British. And that affectation that they had was really, I have a lot of money. And that's what it was. So that's where I got the whole vibe from him. And all of those sort of witty barbs that he says, I think that James is so much smarter than the other ones in Team Rocket. They don't listen to him, and he does freak out a little bit, but that's the motivation behind it. So it was an interesting progression, working, auditioning for that show and not getting anything, and then of course, turning those two into what I think are pretty well-known personalities. Brock's horn dog stuff and James's whatever he is, flamboyant side. That's really, that developed over the years, but I feel very, much a part of that. So, good question. Yeah.
Did the same thing that happened with you and Brock, did that happen to Tristan and Yu-Gi-Oh? Because I feel like the voice.
Tristan and Yu-Gi-Oh. How can I explain this in a politically correct way? Here's how this stuff works. Sometimes people need to flex their muscles in productions to justify their jobs. If everything is perfect and nobody gets fired or nobody gets a raise or nobody whatever, and that person who's supervising everything doesn't make those kinds of calls, then they're not justifying their role. When that show started, the actor that originally played Tristan is a friend of mine. He was great. He was great. He's a sweet guy. He's very talented. He's actually working right now for Disney and probably laughing all the way to the bank. But he was great. But as we worked on the show in the first couple of weeks, or maybe it was even longer than that, people in production decided that they needed to have a say in some of our voice casting. And he was the sacrificial lamb. For no other reason besides they just decided it wasn't that big a character, but by firing him and replacing him, they showed that they were doing something. And it was very unfortunate, because he's a great guy, and I like the guy that replaced him. They're both my friends. I directed Yu-Gi-Oh! I directed the first two seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! I was senior voice director there, so I would start a show, and then turn it over to an assistant and move on to another show. So there's a lot of those shows that I sort of kicked off, and that was one of them. Yeah, so unfortunately that was the story with that. Yeah?
Me?
Yeah.
Speaking of things not always going right, or to plan, and coming back to James, the whole, 4 kids are the devil thing, how did that go down?
How did that go down? The infamous story of Eric Stuart. All right, so let's see if I can do this one in a nutshell here. When we work on shows like those shows, we are paid. Those shows fall under a strange category that at that time was not even in the union. I'm a SAG-AFTRA actor. But those dubs fall under a category that become non-union work, buyout, paid by the hour. The bonus is when we do tie-ins that are commercials, that are paid by the union. Because when you work as a union actor and you make a certain amount of money, your health care is taken care of. If you make over $15,000 a year at that time, your health care is taken care of. And the SAG health care plan is one of the best in the world. Covers dental and glasses and sometimes even some cosmetic stuff, because you're dealing with actors, right? When we were doing the show in the first year, and we would do commercials, I did Squirtle in a Burger King commercial. All I said was Squirtle. That paid my health care for the year. But I wasn't making that kind of money on the show. So these were kind of like a little bonus thing. In the second year, they decided to lift the things off of the show and give them to the advertising companies to use without paying us. And I found out about it. So I was mad at the production company, and I was mad at the advertising agency. And I said it as a joke in the session, but the director at the time took it, turned it backwards, and put it into the scene. But I would do it again today, because here's the thing. When you are a freelancer in any business, especially if you are the lowest person on the totem pole in production, do you know how much the first Pokemon movie made in the opening weekend? $80 million. It's the #1 grossing animated film of all time that way, right?
For 2 weeks, and then I knocked out.
but it doesn't matter because I think we spent $1 million to make it. Okay, that's not what I made to do it.
So it's a $7 million profit.
So if you're making that kind of money, why do you need to take the healthcare away from your actors, especially the stars of your show? Because what you've done is you've handed over their voice work to an agency that would be willing to pay that, because it's a drop in the bucket for a Burger King or a McDonald's to pay that actor $15,000. That's nothing. They make that in less than a second, right? So it was very dishonorable to do that. Why be greedy like that? So that's why I said what I said. And I got in trouble for it. The director and I both got in trouble for it. And we both had to reach into our pockets and pay for that master to be remade and sent out to the networks. So that mistake cost me about $1,000. Not only losing my health care, but also doing that. So that's what that was. See, I'm all about the honor about that stuff. Because I've been on both sides of the glass. I've been on the production side, I've directed and produced, and I've been the actor. So I know how hard it is to be the actor. Why would I take advantage of that person? That's hardly the person that needs, because that's a big chunk of change for that person. Because we know how much healthcare can be. So that's where that story comes from. Yes, but I got in trouble for it. So I paid the price for it. Next question, yeah.
Yeah, so what do you think about the new Pokemon Go?
Pokemon Go.
Yeah.
So a couple of years ago, we were talking about things we could do at anime conventions, because and this is a Q&A, but most of the time what I do is I like to pay it forward. I like to teach you guys something, since I've been doing this stuff for so long. So when my panel is on voice acting, great, I can teach you if you're interested in being an actor. If my panel is on directing an adaptation, I can tell you all the pieces that go into making these shows. Because if you draw, if you write, if you can edit, if you can do all of these things, there might be a job for you in this business, and you wouldn't know that that's even something that could be used as a skill unless someone like me tells you about it, because I've been doing this for so long. So I like to do things where I'm paying it forward, but also I like the interaction. So I've hosted the cosplay contests at some places. I've played Anime Family Feud. I've done things like that. So as fans, maybe besides just getting a signed postcard from me, which is great, I appreciate that, you can say, I had a great experience at the con because I got to hang out with Eric Stuart. It was fun. We played we played video games together. He hosted the cosplay contest. There was interaction. I said, well, wouldn't it be great to do an anime, like obstacle course, scavenger hunt type thing that got us outside a little? That got us to be, I'm a gamer geek. I'm part of the culture, okay? I'm not as much of an anime geek as I am a gamer geek, but look, I work in anime, so I know it. But I'm a gamer geek. And I know how easy it is to go, I'm just gonna get one more level, I'm just gonna sit here and just get through, I've done, and then it's like, oh my goodness, I've sat here for 9 hours, what am I doing? And I'm wandering around this one thing looking for that, right? So I thought, okay, look, we cosplay, you can't always be jumping through hoops and doing things that are too strenuous, and not everyone is an athlete. I'm not saying you gotta go out and we gotta play contact sports, but I thought, wouldn't it be great to do almost like an anime camp, like a weekend camp, where beyond we watch anime, stuff like that, but we I don't know, we camp and we do something, or we go fishing, or, and there's more active things, just a little bit. So when Pokemon Go came out, and it was everyone's leaving their house and walking around and doing stuff to go find this stuff, I thought, exactly. Now, I will say this, I'm not a huge fan, and I'm guilty of it as everyone is here, of being in the cell phone world. I think that interaction with people, conversation with people, I don't like texting. I do it, but I'd much rather talk to you, because I feel like I can really get to know somebody, even just their body language. You get a sense of who they are, and we lose the subtlety of language in text. I was being sarcastic. Well, you didn't put an emoticon that showed that. Or is he being serious? Is that funny? You can't get the subtlety of what I'm doing as someone who speaks for a living in a text. So, yes, it's a great thing. It's really cool to see everybody outside, and I can see how much fun it is. I think the team rivalry thing is not necessary. I don't think it's necessary. Because Because here's the thing, the reason that show, it has lasted so long in terms of being something you guys like, whether you watch the show anymore or not, is because it always had a moral. It was friendship and it always had a moral. It was never, even the rivals, it never got ugly. So I don't like that side of it. But I do like the fact that you're outside, but be careful with the walking in the street and the driving the car trying to catch the stuff. I wish it was audio-based. I wish you wore like an earpiece and didn't have to look at the phone. And it beeped louder when you got near something. So that your eyes were up and that you were actually looking at your friends instead of everybody with their head down in the phone. That's the only thing that I wish was a little different. Because, I mean, that's cool, but to see like 5 people standing together that could potentially be talking to each other and looking at each other, just looking at their phones going, I think it's around here somewhere. Could you imagine if you were, it was like the president's like Secret Service? I think there's a Squirtle in the room. I don't know where it is, but I'm feeling it's pinging. I hear a ping getting closer and closer. To me, that would be cooler than this. But I do think it's great. Look, I mean, I worked on that show for 10 years. The fact that it's the 20th anniversary of the show, and now there's another big bump in the promotion of it, that people are excited about it again, that's pretty cool. You can ask a 6-year-old kid what Pokemon is, and you can ask a 60-year-old grandmother what Pokemon is, and they know. And you can't say that about a lot of other anime. And if it's not your favorite anime, or you don't like the way things were changed in both Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, those shows became mainstream, which allowed more people to be exposed to this genre, which then created things like this. There are conventions all around the world because what started as straight-to-DVD shows like Slayers and an underground movement of what anime is turned into mainstream. When Pokemon Go is bigger than Twitter, you can thank Pokemon on 4Kids TV for creating the monster that it is.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
You've been really close to the explosion that, is that Pokemon started and then boom. Is there ever something that everyone says that you just want to scream at them, no, that's not the way it is, you don't understand? Like, is there something everyone says that...
The one thing I do get is the criticism of the things that are changed. When we worked on a show that went on Saturday morning cartoons, Saturday morning time slot, the networks control everything. Every show, every visual, every script, every element that's going to air during a certain time of day on Saturday mornings when kids are watching television goes through a department called the BS&P, Broadcast Standards and Practices. So every time we did a show, we'd send it in and then we'd get notes back. Change this line, cut that scene out, you can't do that, remove that. So all of that stuff being blamed on the production company is not the case. So I like to correct people with that. James had a gun pointed at someone's head in an episode. We changed it to a finger. I can't believe you did that. Why didn't you hear it the way it was? Oh, I don't know. Would you like the advertisers to not pay for advertising time during that time slot now? Because we were and we're not allowed. We had a show, when we picked up One Piece, I said, we can't do this show for Saturday morning cartoons. Why are we doing this show? It's too much violence. Because different cultures have different rules. Very successful show in Japan, let's bring it over. It's got toys, got this and that. I said, this is not gonna work for us. This is a cable show. We started working on it, and I remember one of the episodes had an entire field of people hanging on crucifixes. This is America. Maybe in Japan you can air that episode and it's not a big deal. There were fans that said, I can't believe you changed that scene. This is America. We don't make the rules as a production company. The networks make those rules because the advertisers don't want to see that stuff, and there are laws in place of what you can show. You know that not until after 9 o'clock, there's certain shows you can't show death, right? Primetime television, on network television, because they feel the kids are going to sleep by that time. So that's the thing I like to correct the most, is understanding where those choices came from and why those things were changed to be safer. Now, Bugs Bunny was the most violent show I ever watched as a kid. I could never find an anvil to drop on any one of my friends. But that was also a cartoon that was drawn way, way, way before I was born. And it was actually a propaganda show. The episodes that you don't see anymore were all very anti-Japanese. It's all about World War II. If you want to go look up some stuff on the internet, you go look for the banned episodes of Bugs Bunny and see what that show was really about. It's a very racist show.
Well, I've seen it.
Violent and racist. So, anyway, yes, in the back.
What did you change the field of crucifixes to?
Cat's eyes.
What?
Yeah, the cat's eyes, you know, like the things you use the string on? You ever see it's like a triangle and you, right? Isn't it, it's like cat's eyes, right? You weave the thing in there like at camp. And that was somebody's job, had to draw those in. And I talk about that in directing an adaptation panel, that's somebody's job, is to change things, especially like when a card is written in Japanese and it has to be played in America. Someone has to change the text on that card as it comes into screenshot from Japanese to English.
Yeah, from what I saw in comparison pictures, you also erased English text from the original.
What do you mean?
Like, say example, a store might have something in English written across it, even though that is a Japanese show. I've seen those erased too, even the English.
Yeah, for two reasons. One is trademarks are based on what country they're in a lot of the time. So when we'd have shows come in, like I worked on Ultimate Muscle, the wrestling show, and in Japan there was a character named the Gazelle. But there were, someone owned the rights to Gazelle Man and Gazelle in the United States, so we had to change that name. So if there were things written in the original Japanese that said like Burger Queen or McDonald's, then we couldn't use that. We had to change that. So that's why those things were changed too.
Something like not copyrighted, like the word shop. Like I've seen the word shop erased.
Into what? To change into what?
Blank. It was totally blank and erased.
Well, maybe they wanted to reference it as something else for the storyline. They wanted to change that. Are you talking about network stuff, or are you talking to DVD stuff?
It was on the TV, yeah, but it was blank, and there was. I mean, it was just a background thing. I
didn't see what it was specifically, because it could have said something. It could have said like, you know, gun shop or something like that. They didn't want to reference something like that. It depends on what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so your gallery for Slayers. Tell me what your honest opinion of his character is.
Gower is not really the sharpest stick, but he's a good, honorable guy. He just doesn't always remember, like, you know, hey, I've got a sword, I could use this, and maybe I can get us out of trouble. And he's smart enough to know that, you know, Lena is the boss. I think that's the case. But he's a good guy. I think he's a good character. He's a hero in his own weird way.
Do you think it was hilarious that he knew about Zelos being a demon before everyone else?
But I think that's kind of the fun stuff. You remember the character Woody from Cheers? Yeah. Right? Woody Harrelson played, you know, what seemed like an idiot behind the bar. But then every once in a while he would say something that was brilliant, right? Because those people that might appear to be a little slower than, and maybe they're not. They pick and choose when they're going to reveal how smart they are. So I think that's what the case was with him. But that was another show where we had no idea what was coming up next in the next episode. So I never approached him from that point of view. I always approached him as kind of like, he took himself seriously, but he was kind of a buffoon. Yeah.
So, I remember you said there's limitations on things you can air. Does that include movies? Because there was Pokemon movies and Yu-Gi-Oh movies and etc. Did you have to change things even though it wasn't on television?
No, because we might change something to generalize and make it less specific to being a Japanese show. And that's the joke with the rice balls, jelly donuts.
I was about to say that.
And the reason we did that is because when we would relicense the shows to other countries, like Germany, France, you know, wherever they were going to do a dub, they don't necessarily eat sushi. And if you say sushi, you think of one country first. If you say donuts, the Germans will think cruller. If you say donuts, the French might think, oh, well, that's kind of like a croissant. So it became something that was more generic, allowing those countries to make the show their own. If you ask a French kid about Pokemon, they will tell you it's a French show. You, growing up, unless you were in the know about anime, thought that Pokemon was an American show as a kid because of the references we made and the characters. And that is the way to approach these so that they don't look like they are. It's a foreign film, it's a dub. When the shows that I worked on as a director, I made sure the lip flap was dead on. I wanted to make sure that it looked like those characters were saying those words, because the minute it was loose lip flap, it became apparent it was a dub from in another language, and took you out of being in the moment of, this is my show from my country. So that's why those things were turned into sort of generic things that could then be, addressed in other countries. Yeah, but with film, yeah, I mean, if someone decided to change something for the storyline to make more sense, there could have been references in something. The frying pan, drying pan line, right? Most famous Brock line ever. I don't even know what the original Japanese was, but for some reason Brock picked his frying pan up and put it over his head because it was raining. I'm sure in the Japanese it didn't rhyme. But it could have been something else. I worked on a show, a movie that was originally produced in Peru, and they wanted us to do an American dub of it with some pretty well-known stars, so I directed this thing, and there was one joke in there that had to stay. It needed to be translated into English, but it had to stay, and it did not mean anything in English. Like, I couldn't for the life of me figure out the joke, because it was a play on words, but not in English. And so we said, can we please change this? There wasn't even like a visual that supported it so much that like something had to be said there, like the frying pan. No, they were adamant about it. We had to keep it in place. So we said it, and it could have been something as ridiculous as like, peanut brittle orange juice. Well, we kept it. And they played it for a focus group in Peru, and of course the notes back were, oh, they loved the movie, and that one scene with the peanut brittle orange juice got the biggest laugh in the whole theater. I'm like, in Peru. So it's stuff like that, we change things when we can. We're like, no one's gonna understand this. But that's a good question. Yeah.
All right. I apologize in advance if you get asked to do this stuff sometimes, but I need to hear this for myself. I was wondering if you could say screw the world.
No, I won't do it for you. Sorry, in the back.
I apologize.
Relating to the same thing you were talking about, is that still going on and they still try to localize it? Or do you think like people get, this day they get the new people are consuming it, they know it's Japanese and they don't need to so much localize it so much?
I think that they're constantly localizing things. I think that you'll even see American television shows that are aired in other countries where they've changed the dialogue to be more localized to that country because the references don't make sense.
For anime specifically, do they still make those changes here?
Only if it's a show that's of that magnitude, that level. If it's not that big a deal, if it's not that popular a show, it doesn't matter. This was a show, and of course then followed by Yu-Gi-Oh, where the goal is, this is going to be worldwide, and there are video games, and there are card games and things like that that are going to be sold along with it. Remember, these shows are 20-minute commercials for the properties that are sold. Right? Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, in the middle. Yeah, you. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. After Pokemon exploded, and then you saw Yu-Gi-Oh coming up, how did you end up directing that, and did you know it was going to explode in the same way?
So I, towards the later part of Pokemon, I was directing a lot of the other actors on that show, freelance, and I was directing myself because I wanted to work at night. I wanted my days to be free to run around to do auditions for commercials, and so I would dub at night. I'd go in at like 6 o'clock. So it'd be me and the engineer, and I'd self-direct myself on the show. So when 4Kids decided that they were going to not use freelance studios and bring everything in-house, and they built an audio suite, and they built video rooms, and brought in a huge staff of people, they called me up and said, are you interested in directing for us on staff, because you've been directing for us as a freelancer, and you direct yourself? And I said, sure, that would be great, but I'm a musician, so I need to be able to travel when I do this. I'm a voice actor, so I need to be able to do my commercial stuff during the day, and I need a flexible schedule. And they were like, great, come on in, let's talk. And so they hired me to direct Yu-Gi-Oh! They had already started casting for the first episode. So I joined them almost at the end of casting. And they played me the first episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! In Japanese. I watched the show, and I turned to the producer, who had never worked with me at all. Didn't know I was a voice actor either, knew I was going to be his new director. And I said, oh, this is kind of like Pokemon 90210. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, oh, this is a great show for everyone that grew up on Pokemon, is a little bit older, and can actually deal with a little bit of the darker side and some other relationships that are going on. It's pretty much Pokemon 90210. It's the same template. And he's like, oh, and I said, it'll be huge. He goes, yeah, everybody says about every show we work on. I said, no, this will be huge. Because it's the same, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. When people take on these shows and try to reinvent how they work, shows that are not successful is when they remove things like characters that at least someone can relate to somewhere. You might not like the hero, you might like the anti-hero, you might like the funny best friend, you might like whatever it is. There needs to be someone in the cast, characters, that you relate to. If you don't like anyone, you won't watch the show. So I thought this was going to be very successful. I was not involved in casting Yugi, Joey, Tristan, Taya, or any of Pegasus. They didn't cast Kaiba yet. So I'm hired to be the director. The last thing I'm going to do is go, hey, I should also play Kaiba. Because that would be kind of a little bit too egotistical even for the actor that plays Kaiba. So I cast for Kaiba. I auditioned all the guys that I knew in the business that would fit the category of what my producer said he was hearing in his head that he wanted to hear. And now remember, I'm working on a network television show. We're already running commercials that say, coming soon to the WB, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm like, not if we don't cast Kaiba. And a whole lot of waiting around is what's going to happen since he's in the first episode we're working on. And we went through a lot of casting, and he still hadn't heard what he was looking for. And as I said, this producer is a very talented guy. I like him a lot. Had never worked with me as a voice actor. So I wasn't about to volunteer my services as an actor. But we were getting down to the wire. The show needed to air very soon. And I had already started dubbing everyone else in the episode, but there was no Kaiba. Now, if you know that first episode, which is really episode 3, if you know that first episode, it's all about Kaiba. All about Kaiba. So finally, I said, my engineer who had worked with me before as an actor goes, why don't you tell him you can play Kaiba? And I said, because I'm the director. I just got hired as the director. I'm getting a salary here. I'm the director. I'm working on Pokemon. I'm working on this show. I'm working on that show. Do I really need to work on the show I'm directing? He's like, we need Kaiba in the show. So I said to my producer, hey, look, I know we've seen a lot of guys and you haven't heard what you're looking for, but I'm going to make a suggestion. Let me try an audition for Kaiba. I'll dub half the show. If you hate it, we'll keep looking. If you love it, we'll be halfway done to finishing the show and then we can move on. And he said, fine, I don't even know anymore what I'm trying to find, whatever, good, do it. So I dub the show and I bring him in and I play him like the first 5-10 minutes and he says, that's it, that's exactly what I've been looking for. This is great, you're Kaiba, let's do it. He walks out of the room and the engineer turns to me and goes, you couldn't have done that a month ago? We could have had lunch breaks. We could have gone outside. But no, you had to wait. Now we got to scramble and get this done. And so, yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things. But what was interesting for me in directing all of those casting sessions and listening to the feedback from the producer was, I know what you want. You want the vocal quality, I get that. But it's the sarcasm that you haven't found from any of these actors. The obnoxious sarcasm that's in there, in that character. That fine line between being a rival and being a villain, because he's not a villain, he's a rival. And so that was the interesting thing about working on that show. I knew it was going to be a hit. It had the right vibe. So yeah, it was a fun show to work on. But definitely my favorite of that style of show. because I get confused by all that stuff. When you're directing a show that's got gameplay and names of characters and cards that you have to clear with the Japanese, make sure that you're saying them right, and is that really how it works, and all of that sort of stuff, it takes away from the creativity of working on the show, because you've got to also follow some of these rules that are being presented. And they change based on the game, based on the way that they want them in the show. And that was a show that needed to be put by the creators. Like, they needed to improve things. So they'd be like, no, you know, sometimes even voice acting stuff. And there's nothing like getting casting approval from someone who doesn't speak English about an English actor. You know, the comments are like, we don't like his energy, or whatever. It's like, but you don't even know what he's saying. So anyway, yes. All right, who's got another question for me? In the red shirt, yes.
So, you were talking earlier about how you saw the scene with the crosses and you immediately knew, like, why are we doing this? Has there ever been anything?
Well, I didn't see that scene to make that comment. I saw the first couple of episodes and the violence with the way the sword play was cutting people up. I said, there's no way that we're ever going to be able to take all of this stuff out. But when I saw that scene, it was just, I knew that would never air.
So has there ever been anything the exact opposite, where you get a note back and you're like, I can't even fathom why they're not okay with this?
Why they're not okay with this? Oh, yeah. And here's a little Jedi mind trick game that I played as a director. It's the game of 3. We worked on a very funny show called Viva Pinata. If you don't know Viva Pinata, it's not the video game that I'm talking about. That's amazing. It's the show. They're 10-minute long episodes about nothing. They're the Seinfeld of animation. They're just funny, stand-alone. You can watch them in any order you want. They are hilarious, and you will recognize a lot of the voice actors on them. They're just, if you ask me what I'm proudest of as a director, that's the show. I recorded the voices individually on that show from a script, assembled the dialogue, and sent those to the animators to draw to the pacing that we put together. That's the way, of course, the shows are done in Japan. So it's called a prelay show, where you put the voices together first. None of those actors were in the booth at the same time. You will not know that when you listen to it. It'll sound like they are all having a conversation together, because that's the way I put it together. All right? So I'm very proud of it, and it's hilarious. Well, the game of 3. That show still had to get put past the BSMP. Broadcast Standards and Practices had to approve everything in the script. Now, they would read the script before we recorded it and make their choices. Sometimes, it's all based on whoever is in charge of that department, sometimes they would get the jokes and sometimes they wouldn't. So when we had a joke that we knew was going to be a little bit on the edge, nothing too dirty, but funny, we would do 3 versions. One that was way dirty. One that we wanted, and one that wasn't funny. And then we'd push for that first one. And they'd say, no. But this is funny, this is making the show. No, you cannot do that. Then let's go for the 3rd one. Let's use that then. But that's not even funny at all. All right, I guess we can go with the 2nd one. So that goes back to I need to justify my job and make a decision. If that person then picked the 2nd one, because we were pushing the 1st one, they flexed their muscles and made their choice. But these are not the joys you're looking for. But that's the joke I'm looking for. And that's why those jokes got into the show, such as when King Rorio, voiced by Dan Green, who plays Yugi, is running for his life from a giant dragon, played by another actor that's worked on Yu-Gi-Oh! I can't remember the name of the character. He's playing like Montague, his little mouse that's helping him. King Rorio says, "Save me and the rest of the family jewels." Not royal jewels, family jewels. They didn't get the joke. It made it into the show. Because we said, well, it's like the royal family. They're like, oh, that makes total sense. Right? There you go. All right, we got a couple more minutes. Who's got some more questions for me? Yes, back corner, then the white shirt. Yeah.
I don't know if someone's asked this before I came in the middle of everything, but you said you've worked as actor, producer, director. Which would you say is either the most easy or the most difficult to do as far as the job is concerned?
Easy and difficult. That's a difficult question. Being an actor requires you to be able to take direction and follow your director. Sometimes you'll work with a great director. Sometimes you'll work with a terrible director. Your job as an actor is to try to decipher what's being asked of you and be a piece of clay and be moldable and be able to do. I had direction where someone asked me to be more orange, and I wasn't playing an orange. I was just doing a voiceover, and I went, I think I know what you mean. And I did it, and they were like, yep, that's it, thanks. So that's part of that side of it. Being a director, or even a director/producer on these shows, you're like the chef. You've got all the ingredients there, and you are in control of putting these things together. The pressure is on to make it great. The script might be terrible, but your actors are great. The script might be great, but your actors are terrible. The animation might be awful. Whatever it is, you're trying to make it the best you can, and you're in charge of all of the ingredients. That is very satisfying when at the end of the entire project, you sit back and go, this is good. This is really good, and I took it from, soup to nuts. I put this thing together. I helped guide this. So that's satisfying. As a musician, I enjoy being like the singer-songwriter. I like to be the front man. That's fun. I also like working in the studio, and I produce a lot of my own albums with my band, but that's a lot of pressure. Sometimes I want to turn over some of those, decisions to the group because it's too much when you're both the star and the producer. So in the cartoon world, I can separate. When I'm an actor, I'm not, I know this sounds, it's going to shock you, I am not Seto Kaiba. I play Seto Kaiba. So if something's not exactly the way it should be in the show, it's still my job. Now, if you asked Eric Stuart to do something, then we'd have a problem if it wasn't something that I felt was right, because that's me. So when I'm producing my own music, that's a tougher job than it is to direct or act in cartoons. But I don't know, I lean more towards directing than doing the acting stuff, though the celebrity comes from being the voices of. If I were making an appearance at a convention and I was just the director of all these shows, you would think that's kind of cool. If you sat with me while I worked on these shows as a director, you would go, that's really cool, what you do. The voice acting side's cool, but that's really cool because of what goes into it to make these shows. But that's a good question. All right, who's got another one for me? Yeah.
How fun was it to work on the songs from like the Double Trouble song, the Two Perfect Girls, the Christmas album, the one song that Team Rocket did in Jigglypuff?
So music is a big part of these things. Does anyone want to take a guess why we always changed the music to the shows when we brought them over here? Does anyone want to take one guess? Come on.
Licensing fees.
Licensing fees. Someone's very smart. So when we put in our own music and then re-license the shows to other countries that redub it in other languages, they have to use our music. So the music department was always like, that was a click. Those guys did very well, right? Now I'm a musician, I'm working for the company, but I'm a director and an actor. I'm not there as a musician, but I really wanted to write some music for some of the shows. And why wouldn't you want the characters on the shows to sing songs about the shows? So I remember they were doing all sorts of Pokemon stuff, It was like whatever you could, like lunch boxes, Broadway shows, sneakers, cereal, whatever it was. And I said, hey, can I create a Christmas album? And they were like, this is before I worked for them on staff, I was still freelancing. And so the production company that was handling all the recording was like, we gotta find out if that's okay. I said, yeah, because the actors will work with me. Like, we'll do some of the songs together. So I wrote the Pokemon Christmas Bash, a song, which is the name of the Christmas album. And of course, all of the actors are on there. And we're rapping, it's really funny. So we put that album out, and it did okay, and it was fun, and a lot of fans still come up to me with that CD. But the Two Perfect Girls song was in the Radio City Pokemon Live. That was a song for that show. I am the only non-cast member of the live show that's on the live cast album. All of the actors in the live show sing. But the guy that played Brock looked like Brock but didn't sound like Brock. So the executive producer of the show said, I want Eric to sing the song on the album. So I am on that album as Brock. So that was a fun song to sing. I had nothing to do with writing it, but it was a fun song to sing. Double Trouble was a fun song to do. But my favorite song of anything that I ever did for any of these shows is on a little album called Music to Duel By for Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you haven't heard Heart of the Cards, you need to go and Google that right now, because not only do I rap as Kaiba, but I remember they were like, once again, putting out music, and I go, can I write a song for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Show? I mean, I'm Kaiba and I direct it. No. Begging. All right, fine. So they were doing some stuff, and it was okay, but I wrote this track with my buddy that's a mix. It's like I don't know, it's like the Beastie Boys meet Led Zeppelin. It's this heavy track with rapping, and just a heavy track. And of course, once we did it, the other guys went back in and redid some of their stuff so that it was as aggressive as what we had done. But they hit my track. My track is like track 10 on the album, because it is the best song on that album. But the coolest thing about it was, we had a guy that worked for our company who was the go-to for any questions about Yu-Gi-Oh! What is this? He could speak both Japanese and English, and he could translate everything for us, but he knew all the rules, he knew everything about the show. We went to him with any questions. I always thought of it like it'd be great if he wasn't really like in the building, but like Charlie from Charlie's Angels, like you just like a box. His name was Sam. It'd be like, Sam, I've got a question. Go ahead, Michael. Something like that. It would just be great. But no, I knew where Sam sat in the office. But Sam knew everything about the show. And so I went up to Sam and I said, listen, I'm going to do this song for the album. I need to know all of the pieces of the puzzle. He goes, but we haven't revealed that yet on Yu-Gi-Oh! I said, I don't care. I need to know all of the Millennium pieces of the puzzle. And he goes, all right, I'm going to tell you. So in that song, I rap all of them before they were revealed on the show. So go listen to that at Heart of the Cards. It's a great track. You're going to be like, I need to go play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now. We got 5 more minutes. Let's do the speed round questions. Who hasn't asked me something yet? Yes, with the lovely ears. Yeah, you have ears.
Well, they're kind of like leafy.
They're still leafy
I
ears.
want to ask you a favor.
What's that?
My cousin is a huge fan of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Could you, I know we got this side, but could you do like a few voice lines, like at least one of Brock and one of Kaiba, if that's okay?
You mean like
if you like?
I'll just use my trusty frying pan as a drying pan.
Can you do that one more time?
No, let's save that for afterwards. Let's do the speed round questions. The funny voices are good, but yes, Elvis. Hey man, how you doing? Thank you very much. What, you're not Elvis?
So in the first season of book 1, I'm pretty sure everyone noticed that halfway on the book, between elementary, between Ashby and some random chick.
Okay, so you got to understand something about the transitions between seasons of Pokemon. For me, it's one long season. No, yeah, but with season 1, when did that end and the next one started? I don't know.
There was always this one girl who did the same voices for like 10 different chicks throughout the whole season 1. Like, I mean, it's pretty obvious that just you had to waste too much money, but why was that?
You heard the same actress doing the same voice?
It was literally, I even checked, it was like the same actor, just did like the same 5-10 different characters throughout the season.
I have no idea. I know that as a director, if an incidental character kept appearing, I kept track of who played that person, even if it was someone who just went, hi. I'd bring the same actress in all the time because I liked that kind of geek continuity. So I would do that. I was the Magic Carp salesman, if anybody is curious. And the Magic Carp salesman made an appearance, and then 10 years later made an appearance, and they were like, who played this? And I was like, that would be me. So I came back in and I did it. So there you go. Yes?
I just wanted to ask what it was like on the set of Career at the Hector.
Kirby. So Kirby, so I'm Meta Knight on Kirby, and when I was asked to come in and audition for that, and this will probably be our last little question here, they wanted Clint Eastwood.
What?
They wanted a Clint Eastwood voice, and I said, well, my Clint Eastwood is pretty much Kaiba. Like, that's the vibe of, right, you know, go ahead and make my day. Like, what am I gonna do, right? And so I said, well, he has no lip flap, because he's just got the helmet. And I don't want to do something that's going to be too close to sounding like Kaiba because I'm doing Yu-Gi-Oh! At the same time. So let's come up with a different voice. Note, some voice actors will use the same voice in every show they work on so that you can recognize them.
Yeah.
Eric Stuart tries to at least mix them up. So I said, how about if I do Antonio Banderas? And they went, this is long before Shrek. And they said, what? Why would he be Spanish? And I said, I don't know, why wouldn't he be Spanish? And they were like, good point. And I said, and the fact that he has no lip flap means I can say anything the way I want. Without having to worry about how you say the lip flap. And they were like, that's so weird and yet it's working. So I played Meta Knight, very legit. Of course, when Shrek came out, I was like, oh, look, Antonio Banderas is playing me, playing him. This is crazy. And then years later, I was doing a convention in Orlando. Years later. And a group of young guys came up to me, probably about 20 years old, and said, did you play Meta Knight in Kirby? And I said, yeah. And they said, we just want to thank you. And I said, why? They said, because you were the only voice on Saturday morning cartoons who sounded like us that didn't make fun of us. And I thought, you know, I didn't even think about that. But when we think about how we stereotype characters, like the Magikarp salesman, which is an offensive character, if you ask me, that this was legitimately a character that they could relate to that was cool. Yeah, can we just close there for the last little bit of this? That was cool, and I thought that was pretty neat. I didn't even put that together. So now Meta Knight has not just become like one of the voices I play. Meta Knight is probably one of my favorite voices I play because there's something more to the meat of what he is. And he's quite sexy, no? I also play Blade Knight and Sword Knight on that show, which is the master of speaking non-English and yet with English. For those of you not familiar with it, one character speaks Scottish gibberish. The other one translates in Cockney. So I would get a script with words on it. There were words. This is what would happen. It's all right, it's all right. I said, all right. What he's saying is, we've got to go help Kirby because he's in trouble. So I spoke as both of those characters, and there were words written for, and so I would read the words in nonsense. I tried to do that with an actor the other day. I was directing them to mumble what I wanted the mood to be, and they couldn't do non-word mumbling. And I said, I could say any sentence in nonsense, and you get it, be like, is it right? And they're like, yeah, man, we gotta get out of here. This is a crazy place. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then I play a concert tonight in Special Events, which is Room D, at 8 o'clock. I play a little acoustic rock and roll show, so please come rock with Brock. And then if you want to look for me tomorrow, I got a couple panels in the morning, and then I'll be at my table in the vendor room. That's where I sit and sign autographs and do all that sort of magic. But you guys have been a great panel to talk to. Thank you so much for joining me.